It was late in the evening, and the city streets were dimly lit with the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off puddles from the earlier rain. The air was chilly, and most people had already retreated to their homes after a long, tiring day. Ahmed, a taxi driver, was winding down after a long shift. The day had been slow with very few fares, and he was worried about making enough money to pay for the next week's bills and fuel. Driving taxis wasn't easy, especially when the nights were cold and the roads empty. But Ahmed didn't complain. He had been doing this job for years, and it was his way of providing for himself and the small family he supported. As he was about to park his taxi and call it a night, he noticed a figure on the side of the road. A woman was standing there waving her hand frantically. At first, Ahmed thought she might just need a lift somewhere nearby, but as he stopped and rolled down the window, he noticed something unusual. She was holding a small child in her arms, and her face was wet with tears. Her eyes looked desperate, tired, and scared all at once. Something about the sight of her made Ahmed's heart tighten, even though he didn't know her. He asked her where she needed to go, and she whispered the address softly. Ahmed recognized it as a hospital on the other side of the city. The distance was long, and traffic at this hour could be tricky. But when he looked at the woman's tear-streaked face, he didn't hesitate. He nodded and told her to get in. She lifted her child carefully, trying not to wake him, and sat in the back seat. The little boy was wrapped in a small blanket, looking fragile and unwell. Ahmed glanced at them in the rearview mirror. There was an urgency in her eyes that told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't just taking a late-night taxi for convenience. She was desperate, and her child's life seemed to depend on getting to the hospital as quickly as possible. Ahmed started the meter, but he already knew this fare wasn't going to be ordinary. He had seen many people struggle in life, but there was something different about this situation. The woman didn't speak much. Every few minutes, she would peek at the boy, whispering softly, trying to comfort him. Ahmed could hear the faint coughs from the back seat, and it made his chest tighten. He wanted to say something to make her feel better, but he also didn't want to intrude. So he drove in silence, focusing on the road, trying to avoid every pothole and every slow driver. The streets were quiet, but Ahmed could feel the tension in the car. It wasn't just the traffic. It was the fear, the worry, the desperation that filled the space between them. He caught glimpses of the woman's trembling hands as she held her child, and it made him think about his own life. He had lost his wife years ago, and since then, he had learned to be careful with his heart. But even with his own pain, he couldn't ignore someone else's suffering. It was a strange feeling, the way strangers' lives could touch yours in a matter of moments. Halfway through the ride, Ahmed gently asked, "Is your son okay?" His voice was soft, almost hesitant, because he didn't want to upset her further. She shook her head slightly and whispered, "He's very sick. I just need to get him there on time." Ahmed nodded, understanding immediately. Words weren't needed. He pushed the accelerator slightly, weaving through traffic carefully, making sure every second counted. The city lights flickered on the wet streets as they drove past, creating a blur of motion. Outside, the night was calm, but inside the taxi there was a storm of emotions. Fear, hope, urgency, and compassion all mixed together. When they were close to the hospital, the woman suddenly started fumbling through her small purse. Coins fell onto the floor, and she tried to gather them, looking embarrassed and flustered. Ahmed looked at her and said gently, "Don't worry about it, just get him inside." She froze, looking at him with wide eyes. I can't just leave without paying," she said, her voice trembling. Ahmed shook his head and smiled softly. "I insist. Right now your child is more important than any fare. Just take him in and get help." Her hands paused over the coins, and tears welled up in her eyes again. She whispered, "Thank you," and with careful steps, carried her child out of the taxi and ran toward the hospital entrance. Ahmed watched them disappear into the hospital doors. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel loosely. A strange warmth spread through him, even though he didn't know why. There was no fame, no reward, no recognition for what he had done. just the simple act of helping someone in need. And yet it felt significant. Life often handed unexpected moments like this, and they left impressions that lingered long after the streets were empty and the city quiet. As he started the engine to drive back, he thought about the woman and her child. Who were they? What was their story? He would probably never know all the details, and yet, in that short ride, he had witnessed something deeply human. Fear, love, and the desperate will of a mother to protect her child. Ahmed didn't feel proud or heroic. He simply felt connected in that fleeting moment to someone else's struggle. He realized that sometimes life's meaning wasn't about the money you earned or the comfort you had. It was about being there when it mattered, even if no one saw it, even if no one thanked you. The ride back was quiet. Ahmed didn't play music or talk to anyone. The city had become a muted place, and he let himself think. He thought about how fragile life could be, how quickly it could change in a single moment. A taxi ride that might have seemed ordinary to anyone else had become extraordinary. He had been part of someone else's story, even if just for a few minutes. He thought about his own experiences, his own losses, his own moments of helplessness, and realized that helping others could heal some of that pain, even if just a little. By the time he parked his taxi in front of his small apartment, Ahmed felt a quiet exhaustion, but not the kind that came from physical labor. It was the kind of tiredness that came from being awake to life's intensity, from seeing the raw edges of human emotion, and from quietly making a difference without expecting anything in return. He locked the taxi and went inside, the image of the mother and her son still vivid in his mind. He made himself a cup of tea, sitting near the window and watching the lights of the city flicker like tiny stars. The memory of her crying, the desperation in her eyes, and the fragile little boy stayed with him. That night, as Ahmed drifted into sleep, he didn't know what the morning would bring. He didn't know if the woman and her child would be okay, if the little boy would recover, or if life would return to normal for them. But in his heart, he carried the hope that he had done the right thing. He had chosen compassion over money, empathy over indifference, and in that choice he felt a quiet pride. Not the pride that comes from recognition or reward, but the pride that comes from knowing, deep down, that you did what was right when it mattered the most. And as the night wrapped the city in its calm darkness, Ahmed slept, holding on to a simple truth, that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could make the biggest difference, and that even a single ride in a taxi could change the course of someone's life forever. The next morning, Ahmed woke up before the sun, as he usually did. The streets outside were quiet, the city slowly stirring to life. Even though he had parked his taxi late the night before, he felt restless. His mind kept wandering back to the mother and her child. He couldn't stop thinking about them, the way she had held her little boy, her trembling hands, and the tears she had tried to hide. It was not just a memory, it was a feeling that stayed with him, a small weight on his chest that wouldn't go away. Ahmed made himself a simple breakfast. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of a passing car. He sat by the window, staring at the streets below, wondering if she had reached the hospital safely. He tried not to worry, reminding himself that he had done all he could, but the thought of her and her son made him uneasy. Sometimes, the helplessness of life could hit hard, especially when it involved children. He had seen many families struggle over the years, and this incident felt different. He didn't know why, but he felt connected to them in a way he couldn't explain. By mid-morning, Ahmed decided to start his day. He stepped outside into the crisp air and started his taxi, preparing for another day of fares. He had no idea what the day would bring. As he drove through the city streets, he noticed the usual mix of people rushing to work, street vendors setting up their stalls, and school children laughing on their way to classes. Life moved on, indifferent to the worries of one mother or the small kindness of a taxi driver. But Ahmed didn't mind. He had learned long ago that life didn't pause for anyone, and the little acts of care he could offer were all that mattered. Hours passed, and Ahmed picked up fares as usual. Some were short rides just a few streets away, while others required him to navigate across busy parts of the city. He smiled at passengers when he could, helped with luggage when asked, and listened quietly when someone wanted to talk. Driving a taxi was more than just a job. For Ahmed, it was a way to witness life in its raw form, to see people in their honest, unguarded moments. And today, as always, he found small moments of connection. A tired worker sharing a smile, an elderly man thanking him sincerely, a child waving at him as he passed by. Around late afternoon, Ahmed parked near a small cafe to take a break. He poured himself a cup of tea and watched people walking by. That's when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and he hesitated before picking it up. On the other end was a woman's voice, calm but shaking slightly with emotion. It was the mother from last night. "Hello, sir. I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said. Ahmed's heart skipped a beat. "Not at all," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I wanted to thank you. My son, he's okay now. The doctors saved him. You got us here just in time." Her words hung in the air, heavy with relief and gratitude. Ahmed could feel the tension in his chest ease slightly. He didn't realize how much worry he had been carrying until he heard that her child was safe. She continued, explaining how her son's condition had been serious and how every moment counted. Ahmed listened quietly, remembering the fear in her eyes the night before. He felt a mix of relief and humility. It wasn't him who had saved the boy, but somehow being there at the right moment had made a difference. He realized that sometimes life gave people small opportunities to do something meaningful, even if it seemed ordinary at first. The woman's voice softened. "I don't know how to thank you enough. My husband and I, we want to meet you in person. We owe you more than words can say." Ahmed felt a strange mixture of pride and discomfort. He had not expected anything in return. He had only done what he felt was right, driven by compassion and empathy. Yet the sincerity in her voice touched him deeply. He agreed to meet, curious and a little nervous about what this meeting might bring. Later that day, Ahmed found himself at the hospital lobby, waiting. He saw the woman walking toward him carrying her child, who was now smiling weakly but clearly feeling better. Her husband followed behind, tall and composed, with a kind expression. Ahmed shook hands with them both, and they thanked him repeatedly. The mother's eyes glistened with tears again, and the father's grip on Ahmed's hand was firm and sincere. "We will never forget what you did," he said. Ahmed simply nodded, feeling awkward but grateful for their words. They invited Ahmed to sit with them while they shared what had happened. He learned that the boy had been very sick for days, and that the mother had been rushing to the hospital in fear that it might be too late. The doctors said that the child's chances had improved dramatically because they arrived in time. Hearing the details made Ahmed feel emotional. The night before, he had only seen the fear and urgency. Now he understood the gravity of the situation. His small decision to drive carefully, to avoid delays, had played a role in saving a child's life. The conversation shifted to their gratitude and concern for him. "We know you could have refused the ride," the father said. "It was late and the distance was long, but you didn't. You helped us without thinking twice." Ahmed smiled humbly. "I just did what anyone should do," he replied. "I couldn't leave you in that situation." He didn't mention how rare it was to feel that sense of purpose in a day filled with ordinary fares, but inside he felt the warmth of knowing he had made a difference. Then came the unexpected turn. The father explained that he was the owner of a small transport company, and that he had been impressed by Ahmed's honesty, patience, and kindness. "We need people like you in our company," he said. "Someone who cares about others, someone reliable and compassionate. We would like to offer you a position if you're interested." Ahmed was taken aback. A job offer? He had not expected this at all. He had spent years driving his taxi, working long hours for small earnings, and now, his simple act of kindness was opening doors he had never imagined. He felt a wave of disbelief and gratitude. The mother smiled, placing her hand gently on her husband's arm. "It's because you helped us without expecting anything. That's why this happened," she said. Ahmed felt tears prick his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. He wasn't used to being recognized in this way, and the sincerity of their gratitude overwhelmed him. The rest of the afternoon passed in conversation, laughter, and stories. Ahmed learned more about the family, their struggles, their joys, and their hopes. The little boy, now resting in a wheelchair, waved shyly at Ahmed, a small smile spreading across his face. That tiny gesture made Ahmed's heart swell. He realized that kindness wasn't just about what you do for others. It was also about the connections you create, the bonds that form in moments of shared humanity. As Ahmed left the hospital that evening, he couldn't stop thinking about how life worked in mysterious ways. One simple decision, to drive a taxi for a crying mother and her sick child, had led to something life-changing. It reminded him that actions, no matter how small, could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. He felt hopeful, energized, and more connected to the world around him than ever before. Driving home, he reflected on the past few hours. The city looked different now, not just as a place of work and routine, but as a place filled with stories, lives, and opportunities to make a difference. He thought about how easy it could be to ignore people in need, to rush past them without notice. But he also realized how powerful it could be to simply pay attention, to act with compassion, and to give a little time and care to someone else. Sometimes that was all it took to change a life, and maybe even your own. By the time he parked his taxi at home, the streets were quiet again, with only the soft hum of night traffic in the distance. Ahmed felt a deep sense of peace. He made himself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and let his mind wander. He thought about the mother, her husband, and their son, and how one night of fear had turned into hope. He knew he had witnessed something rare and beautiful, a true example of how human kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that weren't immediately visible but profoundly real. That night, Ahmed slept with a smile on his face, a heart lighter than it had been in years. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew that life had a strange, wonderful way of rewarding those who acted with empathy, honesty, and care. And somewhere deep inside, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. From that moment on, every ride, every passenger, every small decision became an opportunity to connect, to help, and to show that even in a busy and different world, simple acts of kindness could make a difference that lasted far beyond the moment. The following morning, Ahmed woke up earlier than usual, even though he had stayed up late the night before thinking about the events that had unfolded. The memory of the mother, her husband, and their little boy filled his mind. He replayed the moments over and over. The mother holding her child in trembling arms, the fear and desperation in her eyes, and the tiny boy's weak but hopeful smile. Even now he could feel the weight of that night, the urgency of the ride, and the strange peace that had come afterward. As he prepared for another day on the roads, Ahmed felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Driving taxis had always been about survival for him, earning enough money to pay rent, fuel, and bills, but now it felt different. Life had shown him that small acts of kindness could have huge impacts, not only on others but also on himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of connection to the world around him. It was as if that one ride had opened his eyes to possibilities he had never considered before. Ahmed started his taxi and drove through the morning traffic. The streets were busier than the previous night, filled with people rushing to work, children heading to school, and vendors arranging their small shops along the sidewalks. He noticed the little things he had often overlooked, the smiles of strangers, the way a child waved at a passing car, the quiet patience of people waiting for buses. These details now felt significant, part of the same human story he had glimpsed the night before. During the day, Ahmed picked up several passengers. Most of the rides were short, but each had its own story. A young man sat silently in the back seat, clearly lost in thought about something important. An elderly woman struggled to carry her shopping bags, and Ahmed helped her without a word. Each small interaction reminded him that everyone had their own struggles, often hidden beneath the surface. The thought made him more attentive, more patient, and more compassionate. Around noon, Ahmed received a call from the mother again. She sounded calmer now, but her voice still carried an undertone of urgency and relief. "Ahmed, sir, I just wanted to let you know that my son is improving steadily," she said. "The doctors are happy with his progress, and he even smiled at me this morning. You were there when it mattered most. I cannot thank you enough." Ahmed felt warmth rise in his chest. Hearing that her child was not just alive but improving gave him a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced from any ordinary fare. It was more than gratitude. It was a deep human connection, the kind that couldn't be measured in money or status. She continued to explain that her husband wanted to meet him again. "He has something important to tell you," she said softly. Ahmed hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect, but agreed. Something in her tone suggested that this meeting could be significant, and his curiosity and compassion compelled him to say yes. A few hours later, Ahmed found himself walking toward a small office where the family had asked him to meet them. The little boy was now able to walk short distances with support, and he waved shyly at Ahmed when he saw him. His smile was small but genuine, and it made Ahmed's heart swell. The mother's eyes were filled with gratitude, and her husband's expression was calm but serious. Ahmed shook hands with both of them, feeling a mix of pride and humility. He had only done what he thought was right, yet here he was, being recognized in a way he had never imagined. The husband explained that he owned a small transport company and had been deeply impressed by Ahmed's honesty, patience, and compassion. "We need people like you in our company," he said, "not just for driving, but for managing our fleet and helping us ensure that our service is reliable and trustworthy. We would like to offer you a position." Ahmed was speechless. He had never imagined that a simple act of kindness could lead to such an opportunity. Driving taxis had always been about survival, about paying bills and keeping a small roof over his head. He had never thought it could open doors to something more stable, something that could change the course of his life. Ahmed took a moment to process what he was hearing. The mother smiled and said, "It's because you helped us without expecting anything. That's why this is happening." Her words resonated deeply with him. They reminded him that life often rewards those who act with sincerity, without seeking recognition or reward. Ahmed realized that kindness wasn't just a moral choice. It was a force that could shape lives in ways one might never anticipate. The conversation continued as they shared more details about the company and the responsibilities Ahmed would have. It wasn't just a job. It was an opportunity to lead, to help others, and to be part of something meaningful. The husband explained that they had seen few people with Ahmed's combination of integrity, patience, and empathy. They trusted him, and they wanted him to be part of their team. Ahmed listened carefully, absorbing every word. He felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. It was hard to believe that a single decision, to drive a taxi for a crying mother and her sick child, had led to something so significant. After the meeting, Ahmed stepped outside and took a deep breath. The streets were bustling, but he felt a calm clarity inside him. Life had shown him something powerful, that even small selfless actions could create ripples far beyond what one could imagine. He thought about the night before, about the fear in the mother's eyes and the fragility of the little boy. He thought about the choices he had made, choices that didn't require courage or heroism, only empathy and presence. And now those choices were changing his life. Driving home later that evening, Ahmed reflected on the series of events. The city looked the same, with its crowded streets and honking cars, yet it felt different to him. He noticed details he had never paid attention to before, the way people smiled at each other, the kindness of strangers, the small gestures of care that often went unnoticed. It made him realize that life was full of moments where one could make a difference, if only they paid attention and acted with compassion. That night, Ahmed sat by his window, sipping tea and watching the city lights flicker. He thought about the little boy, now resting safely at home, and the mother who had been so desperate the night before. He felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that his actions had contributed in some small way to their happiness and relief. It was a feeling that money could never buy, a deep satisfaction rooted in human connection and the knowledge that he had done the right thing. As Ahmed prepared to sleep, he reflected on the unpredictability of life. One simple decision, made in a moment of empathy, had led to a meeting that could change his future. He thought about how often people ignored opportunities to help, or how fear and indifference stopped them from acting. He realized that life rewarded those who acted with sincerity, those who extended kindness even when it was inconvenient or unnoticed. And in that realization, Ahmed found a renewed sense of purpose. Before drifting off to sleep, Ahmed made a silent promise to himself. He would continue to act with empathy and compassion, no matter the situation. He would help others when he could, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do, and he would remain open to the possibilities life could bring, knowing that even small, ordinary actions could lead to extraordinary outcomes. That night, as the city quieted down and the streets emptied, Ahmed slept with a sense of peace and hope he hadn't felt in years. He was no longer just a taxi driver making ends meet. He was a man who had witnessed the power of kindness firsthand, who had seen how a single act could ripple outward and touch lives in profound ways. And in the quiet of his apartment, he felt a connection to the world and the people around him that would stay with him forever. The following morning, Ahmed woke with a strange sense of anticipation. Even though he didn't fully understand why, he felt that something important was about to happen. The events of the previous night and the following day kept playing in his mind: the mother's desperate eyes, her trembling hands, the little boy's fragile form, and the sense of urgency he had felt while driving them to the hospital. He had always been cautious about letting emotions get the better of him, but now he realized that moments like these could not be ignored. They were powerful, life-changing, and unforgettable. Ahmed started his day like any other. The streets were already filling with the usual mix of vehicles, pedestrians, and street vendors. The smell of fresh bread and tea from nearby shops wafted through the morning air, blending with the faint exhaust from passing buses and cars. He felt a calm clarity as he drove through the familiar streets, noticing the subtle details of life that he had often overlooked. A child chasing a stray dog, an elderly man feeding pigeons, a young woman carrying groceries while balancing her little sibling on her hip. These small moments reminded him that life was fragile, beautiful, and full of unexpected connections. As Ahmed finished a short ride for an office worker, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and for a brief moment he hesitated before picking it up. "Hello?" he said cautiously. On the other end was the mother's voice. It was calm but carried a sense of urgency and relief at the same time. "Ahmed, sir, I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said softly. Ahmed's heart skipped a beat and he immediately replied, "Not at all. Is everything all right?" The mother's voice trembled slightly, but there was a warmth that he hadn't heard before. "My son, he's doing much better now. The doctor said he's stable and improving. I cannot thank you enough for what you did. You were there when we needed help the most." Ahmed felt a wave of relief and quiet joy. Hearing that the child was safe and recovering filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about the thanks or the recognition. It was about knowing that his small decision to help had made a real difference in someone's life. She continued, explaining how they had spoken to the doctors and how every minute counted when they arrived. "We don't know what would have happened if you hadn't helped us get there so quickly," she said. Ahmed stayed silent for a moment, reflecting on the urgency he had felt the night before. It hadn't been fear for himself that had driven him to hurry, but empathy, compassion, and the simple understanding that someone else's life could depend on his actions. And now the results of that drive were clear. The mother then mentioned that her husband wanted to speak with him directly. Ahmed felt a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He agreed, wondering what could be so important that they needed to involve him once again. A few minutes later, the husband's voice came through the line. It was calm, steady, and confident, yet there was a sincerity that Ahmed could sense immediately. "Ahmed, we want to meet you in person. We have something to discuss that we think will be life-changing for you," the man said. Ahmed was intrigued, unsure of what to expect, but agreed to meet them. Later that morning, Ahmed arrived at a quiet cafe near their home. The mother was there with her little boy, now sitting comfortably on a chair, looking much healthier and more alert. The husband greeted Ahmed warmly and led him to a private corner. Ahmed felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. He had helped them without expecting anything, and yet, here he was being asked to meet for something important. He wondered what it could be. The husband began by expressing gratitude. "Ahmed, we cannot thank you enough for what you did. You went beyond what any stranger would do. You acted with compassion without thinking of yourself, and that saved our son's life." Ahmed nodded humbly. "I just did what anyone would have done," he replied softly. But the man shook his head. "Not everyone would," he said firmly. "And that is exactly why we are here today." Ahmed listened as the man explained his situation. He was the owner of a transport company and had seen very few people with the combination of honesty, patience, and empathy that Ahmed had shown. "We want to offer you a position in our company," he said. "It is more than just a job. You would manage our fleet, train new drivers, and help ensure that our service is reliable, honest, and compassionate. We need someone with your integrity, and we want you to be part of our team." Ahmed was stunned. He had been driving a taxi for years, barely making ends meet, and now one small act of kindness had opened doors he had never imagined. He struggled to find words, feeling a mix of disbelief, excitement, and humility. The mother smiled, placing a hand gently on her husband's arm. "Ahmed, it's because you helped us without expecting anything that this opportunity has come to you. Life has a way of rewarding those who act with sincerity," she said softly. Ahmed felt tears prick his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. It was overwhelming and yet deeply fulfilling. The husband continued outlining the role, responsibilities, and the potential for growth within the company. Ahmed listened carefully, absorbing every word. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance for stability, purpose, and a life far beyond what he had imagined for himself. The mother added, "Your kindness has not only saved our son, but has inspired us to do more for others. You have shown us what true compassion looks like, and now we want to give you something in return." As they spoke, Ahmed looked at the little boy, who now smiled shyly at him. That small gesture reminded Ahmed why he had acted without hesitation the night before. It wasn't about recognition, reward. It was about doing the right thing, helping someone in need, and being present when it mattered most. Seeing the child healthy and happy, and knowing that he had been part of that story, filled him with a sense of purpose and fulfillment he had never known before. The conversation moved from gratitude to plans for the future. The husband explained that Ahmed would start in a supervisory role, but would have opportunities to grow into leadership positions. They wanted someone who could be a role model for other drivers, someone who could bring integrity, patience, and empathy into their work. Ahmed felt honored but also humbled. He had never expected such a dramatic change in his life, all from a single act of kindness on a rainy night. Before leaving, the family thanked him again, expressing how much his actions had meant to them. The mother hugged him tightly, and the little boy waved goodbye with a big smile. Ahmed felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't just gratitude, it was a profound human connection that reminded him of the power of empathy and kindness. He realized that life had a strange and wonderful way of rewarding those who act with sincerity and courage. Even in small, ordinary ways. Driving home, Ahmed couldn't stop thinking about how unpredictable life could be. One night, one ride, one simple decision had led to a meeting that could completely change his future. He thought about the streets, the city, and the countless people he had passed by without noticing. How many of them needed help, compassion, or understanding, and how many lives could be touched by small acts of kindness. He felt a renewed sense of responsibility, a desire to continue helping others in whatever way he could. That evening, Ahmed sat by his window, sipping tea, watching the city lights flicker. He reflected on the events of the past few days, the fear, the urgency, the relief, the gratitude, and now this unexpected opportunity. Life had shown him that small, selfless actions could have profound, lasting effects, and in that realization, Ahmed felt a deep sense of peace and hope. He knew that he would never forget that night. The mother, her son, the hospital, and the simple decision to act with kindness. It had not only saved a child's life, but had also opened doors to a future filled with possibilities. Ahmed realized that life was full of moments where one could make a difference, moments that required courage, empathy, and presence. And he promised himself that he would continue to act with compassion, no matter how small or unnoticed the action might seem. As Ahmed finally drifted to sleep, he felt a quiet happiness he hadn't experienced in years. The streets outside were silent, the city at rest, but inside him was a sense of connection, purpose, and hope. He had witnessed the power of kindness firsthand, seen how a single act could ripple outward and touch lives in unexpected, beautiful ways. And he knew that from that moment on, every decision, every action, and every ride could carry the potential to change someone's life, for the better. The following days passed in a quiet rhythm for Ahmed, but life already felt very different. Even though he still drove his taxi during the day, a new sense of purpose filled him. Each passenger, each street corner, each moment on the road now carried a reminder that small actions could change lives. He remembered the mother and her child constantly, their faces etched in his memory, not just because of their gratitude, but because of the powerful lesson they had given him about compassion, humanity, and hope. Ahmed's thoughts were interrupted one morning by a call from the father. "Ahmed," he said warmly, "we want you to start working with our company. We believe you can do great things not just for us but for many others. We want someone like you to lead, guide, and inspire." Ahmed's hands tightened around the steering wheel as he listened. It was almost surreal. He had spent years driving through the same streets, facing the same challenges, trying to scrape together a living. And now, one act of kindness, one night of empathy, had completely changed his life. He agreed to meet the family later that day to discuss the details. When he arrived, the mother and father greeted him with smiles that seemed to carry the weight of relief, gratitude, and pride. The little boy, now healthier and more energetic, waved shyly at him. Ahmed felt a warm glow in his chest. This wasn't just about a job offer or recognition. It was about the human connection that had formed, about the shared understanding of how life could suddenly turn around when kindness took the lead. During the meeting, the father explained how the company had struggled with integrity among their drivers. Many drivers were experienced, but few had the patience, empathy, and honesty needed to build trust with passengers. "We need someone who can lead by example," he said. "Someone who understands people, who knows that every interaction matters. You showed all of that in one night, Ahmed. We know you have the qualities we're looking for." Ahmed listened, humbled and grateful. He realized that his quiet compassion, something he had always taken for granted, had suddenly become his greatest strength. The mother added, "You may not realize it, Ahmed, but you've inspired us. You reminded us that humanity still exists, that people can be kind without expecting anything in return. That is why we want to bring you into our lives and our company in a bigger way." Ahmed felt a lump in his throat. He had never been recognized like this before, never been told that his simple acts had meaning. It was overwhelming, but at the same time deeply satisfying. He understood that true kindness didn't need applause, it was its own reward. But it felt wonderful to know that his actions had ripple effects, touching lives far beyond what he could see. After discussing the details of the new role, Ahmed felt a surge of hope and excitement. He would be able to help people on a larger scale, to ensure that passengers felt safe, cared for, and respected. He would be a mentor for other drivers, teaching them to approach their work with integrity and compassion. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to make a meaningful impact, to create positive change in the lives of countless people, just as he had done for the mother and her son. In the days that followed, Ahmed began transitioning into his new role. The city streets still held the same familiar sights and sounds, but Ahmed's perspective had shifted. Every passenger he picked up, every interaction he had, was a chance to practice empathy and kindness. He began noticing things he had never seen before: the worried glance of a mother carrying a sick child, the exhausted face of a worker finishing a long night shift, the small smiles exchanged between strangers. Each moment reminded him of the night when he had helped that mother and her son, and how one small act could change the course of life. Ahmed also stayed in touch with the family. The little boy was recovering steadily, and each time Ahmed saw him, he noticed small changes: more energy, a brighter smile, and a growing sense of confidence. The mother and father expressed their gratitude often, but Ahmed never felt like he needed their thanks. For him, the real reward was seeing the boy healthy and happy, knowing that his actions had played a part in saving a life. It was a feeling that no amount of money could ever replace, a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose that would stay with him forever. One evening, Ahmed sat by his window sipping tea, reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought about the unpredictability of life, how quickly things could change, and how a single decision could create ripples that touched countless lives. He realized that every person he encountered had their own struggles, fears, and challenges, and that even small gestures of kindness could have profound effects. A simple smile, a helping hand, or a moment of patience could mean the world to someone in need. Ahmed also thought about the lessons he had learned about humility and empathy. He had always tried to live a good life, but this experience had shown him the real power of small, selfless actions. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about connecting with others, understanding their pain, and acting with compassion. That realization filled him with a sense of peace he had never known before. He felt grounded, more aware of the world around him, and more confident in the value of kindness. As the days turned into weeks, Ahmed's role in the company grew. He became a trusted mentor, guiding new drivers and helping